Trade rumors swirling, a disastrous season in the rear view, but still a fantasy hockey gold mine in the Big Apple with the New York Rangers on our latest league-wide top 5 fantasy target breakdown and the New York Rangers. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, my fantasy fanatics? Welcome back inside the lab to your daily 30-minute source for fantasy hockey, NHL news, and all of the betting breakdowns that you need even right now. With the Stanley Cup Final in full swing, I've got you covered with Game 4 picks. At the end of today's episode, before I get to the New York Rangers' top 5 fantasy targets, I got to talk about some of this offseason rumor mill that's impacting the New York Rangers, their RFAs. So the top 5 list compared to some of our others, I'm going to keep it short and sweet because there's a lot to talk about on today's episode. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We're here all summer long to make sure those dedicated fantasy GMs get a leg up on their competition for upcoming draft season. Shout out to Steele, riding solo today. I hope you guys are feeling it. And guess what? Mr. Rodin isn't here to check me on my New York Rangers takes, which feels a bit weird because if you guys have been holding down the pod like I think you are, you know that this blue shirt squad has been a hot topic of conversation. So let's get into it. Because after a disastrous season, and let's be clear, I'm comfortable using the term fantasy gold mine with this hockey team. You look at the names on the board, you look at the names in this roster, and even with a guy like Chris Kreider, who, let's be also clear, 22 goals, 8 assists this previous year in 68 games, isn't making him anywhere close to fantasy relevant. This is a situation that has to be monitored closely because it seems like this player needs a bit of a rejuvenation, a change of scenery. We talk about this a lot in the fantasy game. And does it automatically mean his fantasy value goes up? If the rumors are indeed true, if you haven't heard them, sounds like a New York Rangers Anaheim Ducks swap is basically a done deal. Things are getting hammered out. I think this means good things for Chris Kreider's value because this might be the prototypical adding a veteran presence into a Ducks lineup for some really good young pieces for Kreider to take under his wing. Cutter Gauthier, Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, those 3 players jump to the top of the page. Maybe they need a trigger man. Maybe Chris Kreider is that trigger man. 52 goals in 2022, followed up by a 36-piece and a 39-piece last year, obviously. Some injuries. A nightmare of a season for the New York Rangers, which I'll talk about in a second, but this is big offseason news. This is also an all-time Ranger, and I was looking at these numbers. You know, Chris Kreider has 2 years remaining on his deal at $6.5 million per year. He's number 2 on Daily Faceoff's offseason trade bait board. Over 14 seasons in the Big Apple, he is 3rd on the Rangers in all-time goals with 326. So clearly things soured last year in New York. We know all about this. But what is that going to mean for next season? That's what I want to tee up with the top 5. I will get to my same game parlay for Game 4. What's cooking with the Edmonton Oilers? Make sure you guys smash that subscribe button. Drop the follow. Spotify, Apple, wherever you're at. The feedback from you guys means the world to both Steele and I because we want to get better to make your squads better. Let us know if you're feeling it or not. Chris Kreider at 34 years old. I'm not going to immediately say you go out there and you draft this player, but he could be very sneaky if he does go to Anaheim, joins up with his old pal Jacob Trouba, and perhaps feels that young vibe working in Anaheim. So that's an angle to be covered. This New York Rangers team is also one of the ones that I think are going to be making some noise. So right now, they are going to have $8.4 million in free cap space, plus what Kreider's 6.5 off the books will add. They are going to need to make some decisions. And Chris Drury has been under the gun. That memo he sent to the NHL, making Trouba and Chris Kreider known, that almost tanked their season. When he sent that memo, by the way, according to rumors, they were 12-7-0. So really things went off the rails a little bit because of Chris Drury's action. However, I wanted to highlight some other angles so you know exactly what's going on with this New York Rangers club. Keandre Miller, Matt Rempe, Will Cooley, Arthur Kaliev are all RFAs for this Rangers type team. And those are angles that are going to be addressed over the coming weeks. So once we see some things shake out for this New York Rangers team, I think I'm going to be even more comfortable seeing where their top 5 lands. For now, let's get to it. The top 5. We'll get to bets. I love Mika Zibanejad, and I'm sure Steele, if he was here today, was going to give me some heat for not including him in my top 5. It was a down year for Mika Zibanejad last year, and I just think that I thought hard and long about him being at the number 5 spot, but when you have a player in Adam Fox who puts up perennially, arguably a 70-plus point D-man, and defensemen who put up those points are just so much more valuable than a centerman in the 70 to 80 point realm, in my opinion, especially with Zibanejad, bad season last year. You also get 108 block shots with Adam Fox, 32 penalty minutes. You know, the shots, I think, is one of the reasons why a lot of people expect more from Adam Fox, but he doesn't produce 135 shots. That's right there around the average for him. For me, he makes the number 5 spot. And this New York Rangers club headed into last season was definitely one projected to be making some noise for the Stanley Cup. Really good top 6 forward group. Pretty balanced blue line, although that was exposed this year, and we'll talk about that in a sec. And one of the best goaltenders, and arguably the second best fantasy goaltending option out there after Connor Hellebuck. So this team's disappointment last year, and even though they finished the season last year, I believe I have it here, 5-4-1, it just wasn't good enough to overcome some really embarrassingly bad stretches of hockey. The front office had a lot to do with that, some off-ice distractions. This year, I'm going to put out there that if people are sleeping on the New York Rangers and their fantasy pieces, that would be an absolute mistake, because I really do see a bounce back from this club, and then you're going to see the value of these pieces increase. Adam Fox comes in at number 5 as an elite fantasy offensive option on the blue line. Sure, you would like some more peripherals from him, but really that's not his game. And when he's bringing 108 block shots last year and those 40 hits, I think I'm very comfortable placing him at the 5 spot. Vincent Trocheck, number 4, one of my favorite players, banger league beauty. Again, these top 5 lists, sometimes it's splitting hairs. Other times it really depends on the format of your league and how many GMs are in there. And I'll talk about that again at the top of this list, and I'll talk about a whole lot of other things, my friends. I keep teasing it. However, Vinny Troch, one of my favorite fantasy players. If you can get this guy on your squad, you're looking mint. 26 goals, 33 assists last year, but it's really the across-the-board peripheral coverage that makes this guy slot in at 4, ahead of Fox, ahead of Zibanejad. 214 hits, 78 block shots, 202 shots on net. He had 6 shorthanded goals, 44 penalty minutes, and nearly 60 points. After the 77 piece that he put up the year previous, I think it's safe to say that this was a quote-unquote disappointing season. Throw him into the bucket with a whole bunch of other New York Rangers in the club in general. But this guy brings it across the board, and that makes him a very attractive fantasy piece that I would be very surprised if he is sticking around. After that 7th or 8th round, I would say jump all over Vinny Trocheck. I could even see him going slightly earlier. Just depends on the format once again. I want to talk my top 3 Rangers out in full with you guys after the break, and I'm really hyped to touch on this Stanley Cup Final just a little bit with my same game parlay coming up for a juicy Game 4 from South Florida. Today's episode, my friends, is brought to you by our friends at Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious, you want to be checking out Wonderful Pistachios today. One of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and the better for you unsaturated fats to help you feel full longer. Personally, I'm loving the no-shell variety right now, the perfect grab-and-go snack for those busy days at your desk, on a road trip, or you just need a quick protein boost. There are go-to on this show. If you love cracking open the every shell variety, get the in-shell as well, a classic favorite. Get snacking, get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com today to learn more. Thank you so much, my friends, for joining me for a solo Thursday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Like I said, off the jump, Steele and I will be back on tomorrow's show. We'll be taking a look at the rest of our NHL league-wide breakdown. Detroit Red Wings. We're starting to see some better quality options. The Red Wings might not exactly have a whole lot, but the Rangers do, and we'll roll on. Number 4 was Vincent Trocheck. Number 3, Igor Shesterkin. And I think this is the right spot for this goaltender, considering JT Miller and Artemi Panarin's value in the 1 and 2 slot. And, I'm a little bit more old school when it comes to the approach of 0G or going after a stud goaltender earlier in rounds. I'm starting to see the true value in the 0G strategy 100%. But I also do truly think that when it comes down to fantasy, it's just like trying to develop a gambling system for making picks or handicapping sports. You can do your best to implement a system. You can do your absolute best to analyze analytics, study numbers, and put it all together. Most definitely 100%. And the more that we get into advanced analytics, the more that we get into technology, not to get off on a tangent, I'm sounding like an old guy here. I get it. However, there's still an ounce of unpredictability. The angle of luck always plays in. So what I'm trying to say is Igor Shesterkin, headed into last season, I think there was a little bit more of a debate over who was that number 1 fantasy goaltending option. This year, I think it's quite clear it's Connor Hellebuyck. But after that, I'm very comfortable throwing Igor Shesterkin in as that second option, second goalie off the board in terms of the most reliable in the fantasy hockey game. 27 wins this season, 29 losses, one of those victims of a really bad season. Somehow still a save percentage north of 900 and a goals against south of 3.00, 6 shutouts. This guy is a stud, and he makes this team relevant and even winnable. That's poorly described there, but even a team that is competitive, there we go, every single night. And that translates into good things for the rest of the fantasy pieces that you might be investing in. So 0G, I see you guys. But if you're going to reach on a goaltender at all, it's got to be Hellebuyck or Shesterkin. And then after that, I truly do believe you can wait. I see a lot of people out there talking about Jake Ottinger next season. That's a fair angle. Igor Shesterkin is one of the best goaltenders that we've seen in a number of years. 4 seasons ago, won the Vezina. 3 seasons ago, 8th in Vezina voting. Last year, 4th in Vezina voting. He's sensational. He's going to bring you those categorical values as well if you're in a categorical league with the with the save percentage, with the goals against, with the shutouts. He's sensational. But when you look at the top 2 players on this team, I just think there is far too much value in JT Miller and Artemi Panarin that Igor Shesterkin has to hit 3rd on this list. By the way, I forgot to throw out some honorable mentions for y'all because I absolutely love Will Cooley. I think he is an option for you on a week-to-week stream that you could be considering for this squad next year. Don't forget about Alexis Lafreniere, who has been mentioned in offseason rumors. Keandre Miller might honestly be on his way out, so I didn't want to bring that up either. But this is a team that, let's take in, when it comes to being a goal-scoring powerhouse, they finished 10th in the NHL last year with 255 goals scored. However, they finished in the bottom 3rd of the league in goals against. Other teams that have hovered right around that 265 goals against, the Islanders, Red Wings, Ducks, and Habs, they have to upgrade that back end. Keandre Miller is an RFA. I've heard rumors about offer sheets. He's likely on his way out. Chris Kreider on his way out. This team is going to look different. I don't know what that means for their overall success. All that I do know is that in addition to the top 5, I would throw Will Cooley and Alexis Lafreniere in that mix. Let me get to Mr. JT Miller because I know Steele's not here, but he would back me on this when he comes in at number 2. The Vancouver Canucks were a hot mess at times last season. Everyone's covered it. We don't need to go there. The fact that he had to deal with, whether he brought some of it on himself or not, all of that distraction, and he was still able to put up 70 points in 72 games, might be all you need to hear from me on this player. He was still able to put up 168 hits. He was still able to put up 55 penalty minutes. The shot total, way down, 137. But I think if we're buying into this angle of all of those off-ice distractions, the dumpster fire at times in Vancouver, he's a New York guy. He loves to be here. This is a player that I think perhaps, given his dip in production, just a little bit like Panarin at number 1, that you're going to be able to get at a very, very good price in terms of the round that you invest him in at. So I look at JT Miller as a very sexy, I don't want to say sleeper because he's far too good for that, but maybe a player that some people overlook when it comes to your draft because he went from 103 points in 2024 down to 70, a plus 32 down to a minus 6. All of those things have a lot to do with what went down in Vancouver. I'll say it again. So do not forget about how good JT Miller and the rest of this New York Rangers club can be, because they're coming. And I think I spoke a little bit about this on yesterday's episode, that it will be a few good teams in that Eastern Conference on the outside looking in. The New York Rangers, I have a feeling, will be back in there doing their thing in the postseason. So hit me with some JT Miller. At the second spot, a player that can very much get you 80 to 85 points, well above 150 hits, well above 50 block shots. He brings the snarl with the penalty minutes. Let's see that confidence return. You'll see the offensive production go up and the shot total go up as well. Let me get to Breadman, number 1, right after this short break. And same game parlay, baby, game 4. This is going to be a good one. I'm fired up for it, and I can't wait for you to hear about my picks right after this. Shout out to all of the degenerate, dedicated hockey heads still holding us down and making us your first listen every single day, even throughout the postseason. Smash that subscribe button. Drop us a 5-star review wherever you are taking in your favorite content. I know Steele would probably get at me for Breadman at 1 when the man puts up 11 blocks last year, 18 hits, 16 penalty minutes. I get that. He finished with a -9, my friends. That was the first time in his 10-year NHL career that he ever finished with a minus rating. That tells me that this offensive dip, is an outlier. 2022, 96 points in 75 games. 2023, 92 points. 2 seasons ago, 120 points. Look, when you have a guy who seemingly gets to triple-digit points with ease, I need to see and hear a really good case for why he should not be the first player on that team off of fantasy draft boards. You don't draft this guy for the peripherals. So if you're properly drafting and you take him and then you back it up with a guy who brings the banger league beauty and the peripheral coverage, then Breadman for sure is the first Ranger off the board. Look, I got some Rangers numbers here as well about their special teams. Last year, there was a lot of confidence issues in this team. They also dealt with some injuries. Who doesn't? But they were awful on the power play last year, finishing with a 17.6 proficiency percentage. That only was better than, how about the Bruins, Flyers, Islanders, and Ducks? They were bringing it on the penalty kill, a top 10 PK squad, killing penalties at over 80%. But they also allowed the 5th most shots against per game. Shesterkin saw 30-plus shots per night. And any goaltender that's going to catch up to you, only the Blue Jackets, Penguins, Hawks, Sharks, and Ducks allowed more shots against per game. Right now, and I know a lot of those teams are getting a lot better, but for now, you cannot be mentioned in the mix in a bad sense in key categories with the teams that I just mentioned. You just can't. You won't be making the postseason. So the team has to be better. I expect Chris Drury to address some of these issues in the offseason. And I think regardless, Breadman, Panarin, however you want to call him, whatever you want to call him, he's a stud. He brings the triple-digit point value with ease. He's a power play wizard. I absolutely love this player. And when it comes to offense over the last couple of years, there are not many better. He's up there in that top 10 category, most definitely. Hit me with Artemi Panarin in the first slot. Let's round that up. Adam Fox at 5, Vinny Troch at 4, Shesterkin at 3, JT Miller at 2, and Breadman at 1. Honorable mention, Cooley, Zibanejad. And obviously, there is still some value in Alexis Lafreniere. There's been rumors out there that he might be on the move. However, Game 4, Stanley Cup Final. I don't know how you guys are feeling about this because everyone should remember what happened in last Stanley Cup Final. The Oilers were cooked. And then guess what? The best player on the planet turned the switch, and he alone, when he is on that level, I've said this so many times, he's not a half step ahead. He's a step and a half ahead in terms of speed on the next fastest player on the ice. And when he puts it into that higher gear, number 97 is extremely hard to stop. A lot of rumors out there that Calvin Pickard might be in the cage for tonight's tilt. I think that would be a mistake. Even with Stuart Skinner doing his classic Jekyll and Hyde in the middle of the series type situation, you got to go back to Skinner, in my opinion. However, this leaves a whole lot of intrigue to the total, which I would love to take at 5.5. Hit me with the over. I think this one, if I'm going to read into the angles that I believe, and I think that's Edmonton shot out of a cannon. If this isn't the Edmonton Oilers' best game in recent memory, and I don't just mean this year, I mean over the last couple, I would be absolutely shocked, and I would also say they don't deserve the cup. Because if they go down 3-1, and I know last year they did the same thing, this series is over. It's different. Not with Sam Bennett clicking like he is right now, which is a whole other beast of very impressive feats. Hit me with the over 5.5. Hit me with Sergei Bobrovsky, though, over 26.5. And that might sound kind of counterintuitive when I expect a high-scoring game, and I do expect the Edmonton Oilers to get theirs. I just think this is going to be a very close game, a battle. And I see them chucking a whole lot of rubber at Bob. He is good for at least 25, 26, 27 saves. And if this one goes to overtime, which I clearly could see it doing again, I would love the save total at any number. Favorite pick in the same game parlay, lock of the night, if you will. Connor McDavid, 2+ points. Again, that might go against my Bob 26.5 saves, but I just think everything that we have read, heard, and witnessed from 97, Four Nations face-off, playoffs, regular season, in the dressing room, in the media, he will show up and respond. They were ghosts in Game 3. That won't happen in back-to-back tilts. I'm going to throw it down. I'm not going to go Mark Messier, but if you're going to bet on one thing, go Connor McDavid 2+ points right now. The over 5.5. The Bob 26.5+ saves, and McGee's at 2+ points, getting you paid out at +361. I'm loving the juice on that. I hope you guys have been feeling today's solo episode. Rangers top 5 targets. Tomorrow's episode, Steele will return for the Detroit Red Wings top 5 fantasy targets. Thank you so much for joining me on the Thursday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Check us out across the Locked On Fantasy Network. Make it your second listen. Locked On NHL today, every day, covers everything across the league. Tap into it. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you guys tomorrow.